This is yours now, Henry. Your kingdom, your throne, and your wife.
All I've ever wanted was to marry a man for love. Well, now I have no choice.
God put my Henry on the throne.
And God put my daughter on the throne beside him.
My mother has decided on a motto for you.
Humble and penitent, you would do well to abide by it.
You think you have free will in this?
These are different times, and we must learn to change or die.
I have learned a way to win. I will pretend to be a dutiful wife, but I will fight them and they will not even know it.
Unrest is breaking out.
Some of your soldiers are changing sides.
Changing sides to who, though? Don't be fooled by her. She's quite the politician.
Lizzie doesn't lose. She always finds a way to win.
Would you push him from the throne?
Elizabeth will strike. Cut off the head, and the snake will die.
Humble and penitent be damned. Hidden and patient. That will be my motto.
Hi, Facebook Live. I'm Ariana Davis, and we are in New York City with the cast of the brand new star show, The White Princess. Give it up for the cast that's here with us tonight. If you guys can't tell, we are in front of a live studio audience. Very fancy. So Refinery 29 is teaming up with stars tonight for a very special panel to talk about this new show all about Princess Elizabeth of York. So we're going to start by introducing our panel. We have screenwriter Emma Frost. Give it up for Emma. We have our stars of the show. We have Jodie Comer and Jacob Collins-Levy. And because this is a night to talk all about girl power and the meaning of women in storytelling, we have two special guests joining us as well. Travel and still life photographer Alice Gow. And last but certainly not least, writer and director and producer Rachel Flight. So thank you everyone for joining us here and for joining us at home on Facebook Live. So for everyone at home, everyone here got to see the show, but for everyone at home who has not seen the show, how would you three describe The White Princess? What's kind of the premise of the show, and how would you describe it to someone who's interested in checking it out?
Oh God, I got the first question. Well, I would describe the show as, first off, I think it's very unique. I feel like there isn't a show out there who has given us an insight of this time in history from a woman's perspective. You know, in a time in history when women were expected to conform and take a back seat, the women in the show are taking charge and holding fort, really. And to be able to play that as an actress is amazing, yeah.
And it's a story of a marriage, the marriage that is supposed to end the Wars of the Roses. So the two opposing houses join with this marriage between Lizzie and Henry, and so the war that has been plaguing England for decades now moves into this marriage.
So The White Princess is based on a historical fiction novel. So can you talk a little bit about how you wrote the show and, you know, how you based it on real events in history, but also made it kind of stars-worthy and dramatic?
So the show is based on a novel by Philippa Gregory called The White Princess. Philippa is a historian, so she researches everything meticulously, and then this is a difficult period in history because there's not that much known about the women because that's not what's written down. So Philippa finds what information there is, then she weaves her book around what she finds. I have a separate relationship with her book, so I approach it in the same way that I would any novel that I'm adapting, and I have to look at how to turn that into a drama series that I think will work for a 21st century audience, with one eye on the novel and one eye on the audience, and bringing my own interpretation to it as well, and going back to history sometimes as well.
And so, Jacob, you play King Henry, who's kind of a villain, kind of portrayed that way.
It's a grey area.
But this is a story primarily told from the woman's perspective, which isn't something we typically see. Can you talk a little bit about your experience playing a male role in a story that's really from the woman's perspective?
Well, it's interesting to me. When I first read about him as a king, there was a quote in a biography I read that said he was noted for having a feminine sensitivity. And it was an interesting little quote that was kind of an anomaly in the rest of the book that I read. And I think it must describe the end of his reign, because the Henry we saw in that episode certainly doesn't have a feminine sensitivity.
But he has a vulnerability.
Yes, but I feel like it's through Lizzie and what she's able to unlock in him as a man and as a king, that he's able to maybe access that a bit more. So we get to see someone who is essentially the most powerful man in England be transformed by his queen and access a vulnerability that's always there, but that he's kind of suppressing for reasons that he probably doesn't understand until he falls in love with her and is able to have a secure marriage and reign with her.
So Alice and Rachel, you both are kind of female storytellers and people with strong voices. What were your thoughts on the show, and what can you tell people at home to expect once they see it?
I'll go first. The thing that I was so sort of captivated by was that like all of the dramatic action, the plot was being pushed forward by the women, and you don't see that all the time. And then the other part was just like the strength of character of these women, and just like for the first time in any television that I've really seen of this period, I started to really understand like what these women had to endure, like physically and emotionally and spiritually, and that was like really eye-opening for me.
Yeah, I have to echo those sentiments. I mean, this time period is not something I'm super familiar with, and then if I, were trying to read something historical, it's mostly the women are just like overlooked, or they're kind of just, a name on the family tree. So being able to kind of turn them into 3D characters and give them like, really psychological dimension is really interesting. And I think the hook is kind of like, I want to find out all the small victories that Elizabeth ends up having and what happens to this evil mom, Like I kind of want her to get what, she's in for.
I love that. And by the way, you guys, if anyone in the audience has questions, we'll have a few minutes for questions at the end. And Facebook Live, if you guys have questions at home, feel free to leave them in the comments below. So Emma, I hear that you had an all-female writers' room and you had some female directors. Can you talk a little bit about why it was important to you to have a big female presence in the show?
In terms of the writers, it was just obvious to me that it should be an entirely female writing staff. And I actually said to someone at the English production company, if I work my way through every single female writer that there is and I can't find enough good writers to staff my writers' room, then I'll look at the men. Well, I didn't need to do that. There's so many shows that only have male writers, male directors. I mean, the numbers for women on shows and in the movies are abysmal, and there is no reason for that whatsoever. So it's a political choice, but it's also, this story is told from the female point of view, so who better to write it than female writers? There was the lead director, Jamie Payne, is a man, but then the second block director was a woman, Alex Kalimnios. We were very, very keen to have a female director. We had female editors. We had women at every level on the show. I don't think there was a single thing that we didn't have at least one or two women.
So obviously, the world's a crazy place right now. There's a lot of, there's a lot of dividedness among us right now, but it's also an interesting time for women in particular. Can you guys talk about why you think this show is timely specifically right now? This is for anybody. Who's going to take it?
I feel like I'm not going to answer a clever enough question.
I'll take it. I just think that like there's something just in media and culture all around, like when we start to see things different, like when we see different scenarios, it starts to seep into us. And so just having this, like as I said before, these women driving this plot forward, and this basically, like what I just learned, the entire production from the ground up was women. We just start to slowly, it's like an osmosis thing. We start to learn that like women can have these roles and women can be a certain way, and you don't need to be docile to be feminine, and those sorts of like little nuggets are so important as like society moves forward. So I just think the more we see it, the better.
Yeah, I was going to add that I think right now more women are becoming involved in what's going on in the world more so than ever, and it's like it's very easy to have a voice and a point of view, whether that's through a camera or a pen or I don't know, whatever medium you choose. It's very easy to now express your opinions, and shows like this probably help people talk about topics like women in these kind of roles. So that's pretty cool.
So there's one scene in particular that was a little difficult to watch. I don't want to totally spoil it for the viewers at home that haven't seen it yet, but let's just say that Princess Elizabeth's first encounter with King Henry is not exactly friendly. So could you guys talk a little bit about what it was like filming that scene, and how you kind of had to get into character when they first really had their first intimate moment?
Yeah, I think what we wanted to kind of gain from that scene was hopefully, whoever is in that position, we wanted Lizzie to gain as much control of that situation that she possibly could. In a situation where she was helpless, she tried to take control, and she didn't show, her emotions to him, which I thought in a time of complete helplessness, she showed so much kind of strength and inner steel, and I think that was a big part of what we wanted to get across in that scene. We did actually shoot it twice, didn't we? The first take, when it got to the edit, apparently didn't fit quite right, and we wanted to.
No, I mean, it was a situation where it was essential that in the scene, Lizzie denies him any power, because the situation is a situation about power, and she chooses to humiliate him and take away his power in a situation where women often usually don't have any power. So it was essential that we got the tone of the scene right, and that it played the way we needed it to.
I love that you guys call her Lizzie. It sounds like she's like our friend.
Because her mother's called Elizabeth.
Right.
They all have the same names in Tudor England.
It's a little confusing. So, Rachel, I wanted to ask you, I know that you've worked in film and TV a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about how you feel TV shows in particular have changed in the last few years?
Well, I think we're seeing all over the place women in roles that they normally weren't in just even 10 years ago. And there's some films and television shows that I've looked at from the past. I'm like, wow, that would never fly today. And that is just like proof that, things are changing. And I think that we're seeing more women of color. I think we're seeing other kinds of situations, other kinds of traditional roles are sort of being thrown out the window, and we're seeing a lot more, even though it's still abysmal, I totally concur, there's more women-driven shows on television. There's more attention towards female directors. So I feel like we are in a moment that's really special. So that inspires me and many of my colleagues.
Although I feel slightly like we've gone backwards a bit, though, as well. I mean, in my lifetime, it horrifies me that we're still having this conversation. It horrifies me that it isn't just 50% female characters, 50% female writers, directors, showrunners, and the fact that we even have to applaud ourselves when we have a female-driven show depresses me. I mean, I feel like it was a little bit better 5 years ago, and there's been a backlash. So it's something I think, of course, we should celebrate the victories, but it's something we can't be complacent about. You have to just keep pushing it.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because most people kind of say it's getting better, but not necessarily.
I think if you look at the numbers, there are small gains, and then there are steps backwards. And I think, particularly if you look at TV writers' rooms, I think the numbers of women actually on staff in writers' rooms was higher a few years ago, and that it's taken steps backwards. So, it's definitely something that the fight is still horribly with us.
Alice, what's your perspective from the world of photography? Do you feel like you're seeing more kind of diverse in terms of both gender and racial representation?
Yeah, and I think there's at least, maybe it's definitely not perfect, but there's more of an awareness that we should be creating and telling stories of more diverse women, or all people, really. And, sites like Refinery 29 are definitely, championing this kind of desire to share more diverse stories. But, I do think there's still many strides to be made, and from just looking at social media, everything does seem kind of one-noted or very escapist still, and it's not necessarily real stories. So we've at least made some progress, but I don't know. I'm still it's getting better.
Something that I just want to add is this whole notion of even saying a female director or a female DP or a female writer. I think just to everyone's point, yes, maybe we're making some strides here and there, but if we're still saying female in front of, if we're still saying person of color in front of, we're still in some sort of situation, which is not equal.
Jacob, what's your perspective as the sole man on the panel? Being a man and being in a writer's room that's mostly women and working on this show, what is kind of your view on how things can get better in Hollywood? No pressure.
It's new to me what Emma said. I didn't realize it's regressed, and to hear that is really disheartening. I don't really know what to say. I agree with you so much in that it shouldn't. There shouldn't be the preface of female X, female Y. It just shouldn't be a thing. I don't understand why it still is. That's all I can really say.
I'll let you off the hook now. So I'm interested, as we're talking about women in history and stories. Elizabeth of York is not a story that we necessarily know. So are there any other stories that you or anyone on the panel would be interested in seeing told that hasn't been told before, or that you would want to know more about?
In the research for this, I asked our historian if there were people of colour in Tudor England, and I was told it would be a stark anachronism. So I got my script team to do some research. It didn't take long to find out that he was wrong, and that there were people of colour throughout history, in all of particularly the port cities. So something I would very much love to do is to move forward with a historical drama where people of colour, women of colour particularly, are the central protagonists, and to discover some of those stories and tell them.
I would definitely watch that. Anybody else? Any other kind of hidden figures that you guys would be interested in seeing more of their stories told on television?
I'll just say, something that Refinery 29 did, the 67% project, I was really excited about that. I think just seeing more different kinds of bodies, especially for women, would be really helpful. Not everyone is going to be super gorgeous or whatever that means, with that sort of very fit model body. I think that we need to take into consideration and include all sorts of body types. I think that would be really exciting for me.
I love that. And so yesterday was actually Equal Pay Day, which we at Refinery 29 were all celebrating, and it was kind of all over social media just talking about how to close the gender pay gap. Do any of you have thoughts on what Hollywood needs to do in order to make that happen, specifically in the entertainment industry?
Pay women the same.
That's it right there.
It's not complicated, is it?
Really not. It's not. So I'm interested, what do all of you guys hope, and this is for Alice and Rachel too, what do you guys hope that people will take away from The White Princess? What do you hope that viewers will learn? What lesson do you hope they will take with them after seeing the show?
I guess I just hope that people can relate to the show, which I think they will. I think essentially, without the royalty and, all that side of things, it's essentially about a story about family and betrayal and love, and I think every person has been through some of that. So I think it's I think it's really relatable, and yeah, I think that's what I want people to take from it. A connection in some sort of way.
Jacob?
I hope it'll change the perspective of this concept of a strong female character essentially being a macho woman in television who kicks ass and effectively is a character that could be written for a man. And this show, I think, shows women who are very powerful being women and staying... Jodie said once in an interview we did in Britain that it's not that need to try and do that kind of that gun-toting kind of woman thing that has so often been seen as a strong female character. It's using things that are inherently feminine qualities, I suppose, powerfully. These women who are powerful without being written in a macho way, if that makes sense.
Right.
And I mean, I would hope first and foremost people are entertained. It's a TV drama. I hope people are excited and want to know what happens next and are moved and all those things. I hope also, first and foremost, it's a human experience. I mean, aside from the powerful women and this particular identification, I hope women will feel men should be able to watch this too. It's about human beings. And I mean, all drama is about the human experience. The only difference between men and women is we have different genitals. Most of what we experience and feel is the same. So I would hope that it will empower women and men and that people, first and foremost, enjoy it as a show.
Yes, I love that. So I would love to see, does anybody in the audience have questions? Anybody have questions? Oh, we have a question right here in the front. Do we have a microphone? Oh, great. Right here in the tan jacket. Yeah.
So in history, it's loaded with powerful female power figures. But I wanted to know, was it emotional as a team to see Princess Lizzie's story come to life as it parallels so much of today's events?
Good question. Who's taking it?
Sorry, could you say that again? Sorry.
So what I was saying is that history is loaded with powerful female figures, and they're often overshadowed by their male counterparts. Yeah. Was it emotional as a team to see Princess Lizzie's story come to life as it parallels so much of today's current events?
I think so. I think it's vital for young women to grow up and have people to relate to. I think Lizzie goes through... You know, she starts off late teens and she grows into a woman and she goes through all these, you know, kind of trials and tribulations. And I think it's important for young women to see that on screen. It's, you know, it was emotional for me, particularly because I'm also working with older women who have kind of been in my footsteps, and I'm, you know, kind of taking a leaf out of their book. And yeah, it was emotional. I think just to go from, you know, from getting an audition and then now to watching it on the screen, yeah, I hope that girls can watch it and relate to her. I hope that answered your question. I'm really nervous. I'm so sorry. I like shaking.
That was great. All right.
Did it feel emotional for you watching it with that resonance?
It was very emotional for me. I come from a family of powerful women. I'm surrounded by women in my day-to-day life. I have sisters that are younger than me, and I look at the relationships that they have with their, you know, the males in their lives, and I wonder what it's like for them. As a male, I don't know that struggle. I don't know what it's like to be made to feel vulnerable by a man. So to, you know, watch that happen on the screen, it made me feel a bit emotional, but I also love the fact that she turned around and she did take the power from it. Although she still suffered, you know, from the consequence of it, she turned around and she tried to, you know, make it known that she's not for the bullshit. Excuse my language.
Well, kudos to you for even taking a second to think about the other side, because not a lot of men do that. Just saying. All right, who else had a question? I saw, I think there's one hand up right there in the black.
I just binged on The White Queen over the weekend, and then I stumbled upon this screening, and I was like amazed by it. And I think that the writing is very consistent, and the production value seems to be more here. And I was wondering, who was cast first?
In the whole cast?
Or among Jodie and Jacob?
Jodie was cast first. We knew we wanted Jodie pretty much from the beginning. I'd seen Jodie in a couple of shows in the UK, Dr. Foster, and then she was the lead in a BBC drama called 13, and just proved how talented, how brilliant she was, and how she could so carry a really complex female lead. Jacob took bloody forever for us to find. We could not find the right person. I think we saw in the end we had people looking all around the world. I think we saw about 300 self-tapes. It was a really hard part to cast because he had to have sensitivity. He had to be someone that we could fall in love with, that we understood was damaged and wasn't just a brute, and be a brilliant actor, and be good looking, and look a bit like Henry. So wasn't hard at all. And we saw the tape. Jacob had his tape sent in. I think I watched it first. I was eating dinner in Bristol near the production base, and it was almost like having to do the Gong Show. We had so many to watch. It was like, it's awful, but you watch like 3 seconds and go, no. And then in the middle of this was Jacob. So we flew him over, and he didn't know if he was staying for 5 days or 5 months.
Well, you got the good-looking part down. We have time for one more question, right here at the front. Up here in the red, she has a question. We can hear, but we need our Facebook Live peeps at home to hear you. Yeah, right here.
That way. It's on? Oh, yeah. I think this is more of a writing question, perhaps, but do you find it difficult, because obviously the events have already occurred, and I think anybody with an interest knows the outcome. Do you find it difficult to create a sense of suspense and drama with that, or is it just such a good story that it kind of works out?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't think I consciously think about the fact that it's based on history, so I might have to work harder on suspense. I think you just apply the normal dramatic principles. I think I don't know it's that well known as history either. I mean, I think this particular period of history, I think everybody knows about Henry VIII, but his parents, does anybody know about that stuff? So I guess for people who do know, I hope they will enjoy the pieces that I hope you'll enjoy, but also I hope there'll be some surprises in there, because of course with this period, there's so little that is actually known about the women. There has to be invention, and to make a great TV show, there has to be invention, because the trouble with history is just this happened, then this happened, then this happened. There's no cause and effect. So I hope you will also find some stuff in there that surprises you.
Good question. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. For everyone at home that's watching, you can tune into The White Princess on Starz on Sundays starting on April 16th at 8 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. So thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. See you soon.